Hello and welcome. We are going to discuss today about OpenVAS, a quick overview. So I will try to answer these questions here in order to move quickly with the overview of the product. What is it? It's a vulnerability scanning tool, meaning it will perform a series of tests in order to identify potential vulnerabilities in your hosts and services. A vulnerability scanning tool is a bit different from a pen testing tool, and here it's a bit of a personal opinion in that vulnerability scanning is not so intrusive, and it will just query services and trying to identify service behavioral patterns in order to identify a specific version of the service, and it can then correlate that version with vulnerabilities, while pen testing tools are actually running exploits and may affect your services. So be aware of this aspect. If you want some comparable products, we can mention a couple of those here. I will start with Nessus, which is actually the product from which OpenVAS originated. So OpenVAS is actually a Nessus fork. We can say also Qualys, Acunetics, and of course there's a longer list. For the strong points of the product, I think the fact that it has a free version, it's a really strong point for some of us. It's open source, and is scalable. Actually, you can implement it in a distributed fashion, which in turn allows for horizontal scaling, which is a really nice thing, I think. For the history part, as I told you, it originated from Nessus, and at some point was acquired by a company called Greenbone, and now the product has been renamed to Greenbone Vulnerability Scanner. As I already told you, there is a free version and an enterprise version. The difference being that in the enterprise version you have a larger database of vulnerability tests that the solution can perform. In the free version, as of now, we have around 64,000 NVTs. These are the tests. Now I'm going to show you the GUI really quick so you have a first contact with the product. As you can see, the GUI is running on HTTPS on port 9392 in my case. In most of cases, this is the default port for the GUI, but it can also be the standard HTTPS 443. This is my login page. And it's a very simple interface. One of the things that I like about OpenVAS is that the interface is not standing in your way, and it's very simple and intuitive. For the configuration, you have the target objects, which are your hosts and services that you want to scan, and the scan configs, which are templates of like collections of tests that are performed. Let's go here and see a couple of these. So you see there are a couple of these that you have when you are installing the product out of the box. One thing that I want you to notice here is the description of these scans, and this is the important part that I want to show you. Those that can stop services slash hosts. So you need to be aware that some of the actions that OpenVAS can take can affect your services. So if you put together the targets and the scan configs, you will have a task. And after you run the task and after the task is finished, at the end you will get a report about what the task has found. Let's go inside one of these reports. You can see the findings are categorized by severity. And if we go inside one of these vulnerabilities to analyze it a bit closely, we can see there is really interesting information here about the solution type that OpenVAS is recommending. As you can see, there is already a vendor fix available, so by patching this service, we can address the vulnerability. In other cases, OpenVAS might recommend you to put some security mechanism in front of the service because a vendor fix is not available. It tells you what are the affected OS and software versions for this vulnerability, and also really important, what it did in order to detect this vulnerability. And as I told you in the beginning, with the difference between the pen testing and vulnerability scanning, with vulnerability scanning, most of the time, it will try to find the specific version and match it with a vulnerability, a documented vulnerability from some security advisory or something like that. You also have links to the security advisories that are talking about that vulnerabilities here. Another nice thing here, you have a quick overview of the vulnerabilities database. As you can see in this instance, we have 60,000, but it's not. But this instance hasn't been updated in a while, so that's why we have only 60,000. Because as I told you, there are around 64,000 actually, and that's about it with the GUI. So now let's get back to our drawing board. And check this one. Alright, so for the architecture diagram, there are three main components to this solution. And I will start here at the bottom with the OpenVAS scanner, which is the component that is doing the actual scan. It will use the network vulnerability test from the database, from this database here, and it will run those tests on our targets, which are hosts and services. An important thing about the OpenVAS scanner is that it is using a Redis database to store partial config results, and is doing this in order to improve the speed and the performance of the scan. Redis is a very fast database system. The OpenVAS scanner is listening on TCP port 9391 because OpenVAS scanner is controlled by another component, which is the OpenVAS manager, this one right here. And the OpenVAS manager has the controller role in the solution. It is also using a database system. It's actually using a local database, SQLite, and it is storing in this database basically configuration elements like user configuration and targets and scanner configuration and report results and things like that. The OpenVAS manager is listening on TCP 9390, and the configuration of the OpenVAS manager is done from the security assistant, which is the third important component of the solution. So if we can number those, let's say we have 1, 2, and 3. So the security assistant is the GUI that I showed you earlier, the web interface, listening on port TCP9392 or the standard HTTPS 443. And from this security assistant, we are creating the configuration of the OpenVAS manager, which is stored in the SQLite local database. There is also a CLI security assistant version. And I told you in the beginning that you can have a distributed architecture, and you can do that by installing multiple scanner components on multiple hosts, and of course your performance will be improved. Last thing before I wrap this up, I want to talk a bit about the content of the vulnerability database. And we have three object types in this database. The MVT, which is the network vulnerability test, and these are the actual tests that are performed. The SCAP, which are compliance checks, so it's not only performing vulnerability tests, but also configuration checks in order to find out if your hosts and services are configured according to some compliance standards. And the last object type is the CERT, which is actually a database of security advisories. As I showed you also, for each vulnerability you have links to specific security advisories and CVE numbers and stuff like that. So that's the whole lesson for today. I hope this cleared out a couple of things for you, and I promise in the next lesson I will present you more interesting things, and hope to see you there. Bye bye.